I'd like to start with a question. So what's the best idea you've ever had? Now, by idea, I don't mean taking that job, not taking that job, asking that person to marry you, moving house, moving countries. By idea, I mean something that has tangibly changed attitudes, behaviors in the real world. Could be a product, could be a service, could be a social cause, could be a political movement, but it has to have had tangible movement in terms of change, in terms of people's behavior and attitude in the real world, not just you. Now, say your idea. How did you judge it? How did you know it was a good one? Did you think it was an idea worth sharing, perhaps? Now, I work in a business of ideas. If we don't have ideas, we're not in business. So we have to churn them out constantly. Now, I've done it for about 23, 24 years, and I've asked that question of thousands, hundreds of thousands of ideas with people around the world in different industries, different capabilities, and it's a really hard question to answer. I suspect the reason it's hard is, firstly, there is no agreed definition of what a good idea is. Even within the creative industries, even within companies within creative industries, you don't know what, there's no real judging criteria. But also, and as today is proved, I think it brings up a lot of emotions. The idea of actually coming up with an idea, the energy, the creativity of it, it's exciting. It gets back to what it means to be human. Connecting the dots and producing something, giving birth to something powerful is a deeply human thing. But on the flip side of that, there's regret. I mean, this brings up stuff for me, ideas that I've had that I just haven't done anything with. Just let it die in the corner. Maybe come back to it occasionally and look at it, but the enormous amount of regret around ideas. There's also an enormous amount about jealousy. How did they come up with that idea? How did they make it happen? Personal and professional. So the whole idea about ideas is deeply complicated and it's deeply personal. But as I've kind of explored this over the years, and again, I've got a background in psychology as well as kind of advertising and strategy, I realized that it's actually more complicated than it looks. And to understand that, you really have to go to wine. Now, obviously, I live in France, so I'm naturally inclined to move towards wine. But there was a fascinating study done about 2001 by the University of Bordeaux, and they gave 54 wine students. So these people are learning how to learn about wine, and they gave them 2 glasses of wine, one red and one white. And they said, "Okay, just taste it and see what you think." And they came up with things that you'd probably expect, so honey, lemon, lavender, elderflower, things like that for the white, and then for the red, cherry, I think it was, peony. I didn't know what peony was. I'm clearly not a wine expert, but plum, raspberry, kind of stuff you'd expect. So there's nothing confusing about that, right? The problem is they gave them the same glass of red wine, the same glass of white wine, and just the red had a bit of red pigment that was tasteless. Now, obviously this did not go down well in France, but it's not an isolated incident. They then took a group of experts, so these are the people who judge wine for a living. They put the little gold dot on the wine you choose in the supermarket, and they gave them a bottle of what is called Grand Cru, which is just the really expensive stuff that you only drink if somebody else buys it for you, and then the vin de table, which is the kind of standard house wine. And they said, can you just, as a group, can you just describe us the flavors, please? Complex, balanced, rounded. I'm not going to do a French accent, by the way. And the vin de table was weak, faulty, but I think you might have already guessed what this. They'd given them the same wine, but in a different bottle. So they were both vin de table, so average wine. These are experts. These people know what they're talking about. And again, this did not go down well in France, but it's a fact of life. Your expectations, your beliefs about something define the reality of it in almost every respect. Now, this has problems when you get to political discourse and things like that, because you suddenly realize why people are so entrenched in their opinions, but that's for a separate conversation. But if we take that learning, and it's been proven in lots of different aspects of life, we take that learning, what does that mean for your ideas? So if you think you're a creative genius, you're God's gift to ideas, we've all met them, do you think you're going to overcompensate for your idea and you're going to think it's better than in fact it is? Probably. What about the rest of us who were told when we were younger, oh, you're not really creative, you're not an ideas person? Do you think you're going to think your ideas are worse and more shit than the person whose ideas come from a creative genius? Quite possibly, yes. Especially if you put those two kind of people together, you start to have a conversation that is really complicated emotionally. So, I've been trying to work out, okay, given that this is a deeply subjective arena, and given that I have to help navigate ideas for my business, otherwise I lose my job, I've got a hunch that there are kind of 3 fundamental things that an idea has to have. The first is conviction. Conviction, by conviction I mean a belief about, a point of view about something in the world that you believe needs to change. A change agent. Now, it doesn't have to be worthy, it doesn't have to be saving children in Africa, it does not have to be fixing the plight of the homeless or global warming, but it does need to be something that you care about and you want to see shifting in the real world. Now, naturally, that means you have an enemy. It has something to push against, which is the status quo. And because it's the status quo, you're going to naturally have a group of people who either agree with you, and I call them the hell yes, so they've got your back, they have the agenda, the shared agenda of what you believe. I want to buy some of that, please. And then you've got the group of people who usually are attached to the status quo. And they say, hell no, I am not doing that. Not a chance in hell. Now, when you're looking at ideas, and I do this constantly every day, it's really complicated because what you don't want when you're talking about an idea is for somebody to go, I don't like it. I hate it. But one thing I realized over the years was that's a good thing. Polarization is a good thing. It means 2 things. It means something to somebody. It means there's a kind of nascent need, so there's a gap that needs to be filled. And it also means that the timing is right. And the world is littered with great ideas that just, their timing was slightly off and it just didn't happen. But polarization gives an idea an energy that really means it's going to continue into the world. And the other thing I've learned is if you've got a great idea, unless you really believe in it and you really need to push it, it will die. All the great ideas you see in the world have an enormous amount of energy behind them. So I think conviction at its very basic level is this, which it lights a fire in the world. It lights a fire in you, and it lights a fire in other people. So I'm quite a simple chap. I have I've created a formula that I think helps define what conviction is, and it flows. So 4, so this is the people who believe, you believe want to see change in a world where, so that captures the essence of the status quo, perhaps a little nudge to what needs to change and what needs to be different. The future must, so this is about foresight, about projection, saying this is what the future needs to be for us to get there. And then so we do, which is the tangible action. And I picked an example of Airbnb, which is something I use a lot of and I've never worked on to try and be objective. So for people who have an appreciation to be closer to the culture that they visit when they travel, in a world where cookie-cutter hotels are pretty much the norm, and I spend a lot of time in hotels, you can be in 5 different cities, 5 different places and feel like you're in the same place. It's kind of, you're living this kind of bubble. The future must allow people to experience the world that they see when they're traveling in a completely different kind of way. They must feel closer to the culture they feel they're there. So we allow people to share their homes in a secure, safe, profitable way. So it kind of works for something that I haven't worked on. The second part is you can have a great conviction, but if people don't integrate it into their lives some way, you're in all sorts of trouble. It doesn't matter what it is. And by adoptability, I mean it's the bridge between a concept and reality, the bridge between where you are now and where you need to be. And I was kind of running joke in my company that if you don't have adoptability, your idea is more of a kind of prayer and a wish than it is actually an idea itself, because it really is not going to happen. And to understand integrating into people's lives, you have to then get into habits and rituals. And the studies have estimated between 40 and 50% of our everyday existence is habit. So unconscious stuff that we're not even aware that we're doing it. And I always find this metaphor really helpful. It's like a ski run going over and over thousands and thousands of times, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually, you just either, even if you know there's a great run on the other side of the valley, you just can't climb out of it. It's too hard. So, this is the point in the presentation where you go, okay, well, that's great, Saul. Well, how on earth am I supposed to change behavior then? But behavioral science has shown that most people make quite irrational decisions. I mean, this is a perfect example of it, taking the escalator to the gym when you're about to work out and use your muscles. But it's very clear what's going on, that it's weird, but it's also given us a really good guide about how to change behavior. And there are lots of really clever models with lots of smart people working on them. But I think it comes down to 3 fundamental things. One is obvious, which is motivation. And that should come from your conviction. That's where the energy is. Motivation, so I need to really want to do this to overcome all the challenges. Ease, it needs to be easy to do. Humans, including myself, are fundamentally lazy. They won't do stuff unless it's easy for them to do it. And then permission, and this one's slightly strange, but we are deeply social individuals. We define our behavior and attitudes by other people around us. So there's a very interesting study done in the States by a load of academics, and they partnered with a hotel chain. You guys all stayed in hotels where you have a little card that says, please reuse the towels. They're obviously trying to get you to help with their environmental cause. And they tested, this is real life test, they tested 3 different versions. One which was, please reuse towels and save the environment, so that's appealing to their social, their environmental credentials. Most hotel guests reuse their towels, and most hotel guests in this room reuse their towels. And significantly more people reuse their towels when they were told that the person who was staying in that hotel before them was using it. Now, think about that for a second. So the motivation of saving the environment, which is arguably the problem of our time, was less important to people than somebody they didn't know who stayed in the room that they stayed in. But it just shows you, even if it's implicit, we look for permission outside ourselves. We can't help but do it, and it's a human condition. So, adoptability. I'm going to go on a little simple framework. It's motivating because we make it easy by, we give permission through. Now, if you apply it to Airbnb again, it's motivating because I get a chance to feel what it's like to be a local, to belong. I also, if I'm an owner, I get extra revenue for my room. It's downtime. We make it easy by, the experience of booking an Airbnb hotel is very, very similar to a hotel. It's not different, it's just a bit better, so that's easy. And then we give permission through the whole rating system. People like me are choosing to do this. So you've got this implicit system of permission which really helps do it. So lastly, infectiousness. And by infectious, I mean it takes a life of its own. It self-propagates, it naturally amplifies. And what that means is it's owned and built and championed by other people. So it's not just you. People pick it up and run with it. Now, if you have a really good conviction and you have a really good adoptability system, it naturally does this. But often, especially in the commercial world, you have ideas that are quite similar. So you need to give it an edge. You need to give it some sort of clear positioning. And how to do that is, and I've learned this the hard way, you need to do 3 things that are not mutually exclusive. One is emotion induce. So we know from cognitive neuropsychology, and we know from marketing, that if you can engage somebody emotionally, you're much, much more likely to get them to change their behavior in a way that you feel you want to do it. The second one is truth generating. So this is about, and we talk a lot in my business about insight generation, but really it's about what insight do I generate in somebody else when I see it. So reframing the situation around it to make you think about something in a really powerful way. And then lastly, story launching. There's some amazing TED Talks about how inherently powerful storytelling is to the human condition. But our brains are wired. They cannot help tell stories. It just happens. And I've picked an example which is attributed to Ernest Hemingway. There's a debate about whether it is or not. But I don't know whether you guys have seen this, but it's a really simple thought, which is for sale baby shoes. So just appreciate that for a second. And then you put never worn. Now, I think unless there's something wrong with you, that touches you somehow, some way. Now, these are just words. You immediately connect with it, but also you start to story launch. How old were they? What happened to them? Who were the parents? Did they have any more kids? It's impossible not to do it. You go backwards and forwards. These are just words, but you then start to have a reframe of a conversation that is really helpful if you want to change people's behavior and attitudes. So lastly, we have a simple framework for infectious, which is we emotion induce, we truth generate, and we story launch. And I'm only showing one ad, even though I work in advertising. But I think Airbnb did this really well. They've got a really nice sense of belonging in terms of what they mean to people. And they've got a lovely thought, which is don't visit there, live there. Now, that for me, as somebody who appreciates cultures where I go and travel, I have a reframe around what I believe travel is. I then start having an emotional relationship with it and also start to think about, well, I wonder what my previous situations in terms of traveling would be like, and I also wonder what that would be like to live there, whether it's Rome, whether it's Paris, whether it's England. So you start to have a different kind of emotional relationship with it. So, conviction, adoptability, and infectious are the three things I think are really important to defining a good idea. Is it universal? I'm not sure. Is it useful? I found it very useful. And I think it's a kind of virtuous cycle. If you get a good conviction, and you get a good adoptability, it becomes infectious and it cycles itself. So I'll leave you with this. If the idea that we talked about right at the beginning, how does it stack up against those three things? Is it a vin de table or is it a grand cru? Thank you very much.